Today, Jets training camp opens, rookies report, so many things to talk about. The 2026 football season's officially here. Let's go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Jets Talk Now. I'm Paul Fiore. Please click like and subscribe. It's been quite a while since I've been on here. And, off season, I try to record videos relevant to the big things that were happening. So I did some stuff on the draft, did some stuff on free agency and a couple of things here and there, but certainly not anywhere near as much content as I do during the season. Trying a virtual background, which I'm not sure how I feel about it right now because I'm kind of funky, but I don't know. I like the background. I just don't love how it renders. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We have a lot to cover today. Jets training camp opens. Before we get into everything to look for, let's do a quick recap on the off season. I thought in general it was a really good offseason for the Jets. Free agency moves made sense to me. They brought in a bunch of guys with kind of leadership backgrounds and experience with Demario Davis, Minkah Fitzpatrick, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I think it was necessary with Glenn now taking over play calling to have people that he believes he can trust to run that defense, to set examples for a lot of the younger players because the Jets do have a relatively young roster in general. And then on offense, really, most of the moves were heavily done in the draft, which I felt, at the time I wasn't in love with the Klubnik selection, but certainly the first three selections I was very happy with. Feel like Darren Muji's done a really nice job in acquiring talent, free agency-wise, trade-wise with getting Sweat, maintaining cap flexibility as they enter next year. All very important because I think this is a season that sets up 2027 if we're being realistic and honest about what our expectations should be for the Jets. Obviously the other big moves, Frank Reich comes in as offensive coordinator. We'll talk about that in this video. Glenn calling the plays defensively after they got rid of Steve Wilks, kind of conducted a weird search for a defensive coordinator that wound up with Glenn becoming the guy. I think when all things are said and done, as much as that was a strange search, and, the Jets were a butt of jokes from people online, Twitter world, reality is it's the right decision. Entering year two, coming off of a 3-win season, Glenn calling the plays and not just functionally operating in a system that isn't his, just never really made much sense. So overall, I thought the offseason was positive. It was pretty quiet. We did have a few Geno stories. The first one was the one that was the most alarming. Thankfully, it was a nothing burger. I had said on Twitter/X at the time, I wasn't going to share the video that was widely being shared just because I didn't think it was appropriate. Good news is police dropped an investigation. There's no formal charges. We move on. The speeding tickets are the speeding tickets. I have my own personal view of the fact that Geno is a 35, almost 36-year-old man who's the quarterback of a multi-billion-dollar franchise. It would be nice if he learned that, when you drive $300,000 sports cars with the wrong plates, that you're going to be targeted for some of these things that he got pulled over for. With that said, everyone forgets those things the minute the season begins if he starts throwing touchdowns and minimizes interceptions. So let's talk about training camp. This is AG's big year. I think the reality of it is if he does not show progress in 2026, and we'll talk about what progress is, it's likely he gets replaced. Now, what that means for Darren Muji, I think, is completely different because if we're just being honest with the situation today, Muji has probably shown some more promise today than Glenn has. Now, I know Glenn and him are both involved in personnel, but Muji's the one making the trades. Muji's the one making the contracts. Muji's the one navigating the draft. Certainly they collaborate on the player decisions, but I think Muji's done a really nice job of creating a lot of flexibility with this roster, getting them younger, bringing in a bunch of talent. I mean, if you look at the offensive side of the ball, aside from Geno, Most of their impact players / position talent is young. And, the defense is being rebuilt. I'd say the defense is probably behind the offense from a totality of the build, but no one was ever going to build this team completely in one season. It would be a 2-year build. So I feel really good about what Muji's done. Aaron Glenn, first season, whether you're a Glenn apologist or a Glenn hater, I try to take this down the middle and an unbiased view. And it's hard to be unbiased because I'm a Glenn fan. I'm a huge Jet fan. I want him to be successful. But from a purely unbiased perspective, he had a really bad season 1. He was bad with the media. He was bad with in-game decision making, and you could say game planning was poor. The decisions of hiring Wilkes was bad. Bringing in Fields, which from all accounts was his guy, was bad. So there was just a lot of bad last year, and it didn't feel like he ever figured it out during the season. He got ornery at the podium. He started playing games about who his starting quarterback was. He unnecessarily defended Justin Fields. Lots of things, right? At the end of the day, they won 3 games. He has no rope going into season 2. So this is a big year for him. Wisely, he's taking over the defensive play calling. I think that's important because now he has no excuses for the scheme that they run and how they perform. They brought in talent, significant improvement overall on the roster, I think, that gives him an opportunity to show improvement as a head coach. And I will say in the offseason this year, I'm encouraged by how he has behaved with the media in just the direct back and forth. Now, many people will say, who cares? Look at Bill Belichick. He's an ornery, jerk, and he won all those games. You can be that guy when you win. And when you don't win and you're bad at football, like North Carolina has actually been since Bill Belichick's been there, you become the butt of jokes. So, Aaron Glenn still gives you bad quotes, like defensive play calling is his superpower. That's going to be held against him if it turns out to be a bad season. But again, objectively down the middle, I would say Glenn had a bad year 1, and he's had a promising start to how he's engaged so far at the beginning of year 2. I like what his messaging has been. I'm encouraged by kind of his mindset and bringing in a guy like Frank Reich. I think while it's questionable whether Reich is, past his prime and if the league has passed him by, the idea that you're going to bring in an experienced play caller on offense so you can really focus your time and energy and effort on the defense and game planning to try to put your best foot forward makes a ton of sense. But it's a big year. I do not believe the Jets can get away with winning 5 games this season and Aaron Glenn gets a 3rd year. The Jets have too much cap space. They have too much draft capital. They have too much young talent now that if Glenn is not arrows pointing clearly up, I think it's likely that the Jets will be in a coaching search at the end of the season. And I think that means, and I know people don't like to put wins and losses on it, but I don't think you can clearly say if the Jets win 5 games or less that they're showing signs of being a good football team. I think the minimum has to be a 6-win, and that's being really fair. But I think at the minimum he needs a 6-win season, ideally 7 or better. But show competency on the field, look like an actual NFL football team. It sounds weird to say, but be the average bad football team. Just don't be a laughing stock, right? So let's see. I know Woody loves him. You can tell there's a lot of hope there from Woody that Glenn is the answer. And as a Jet fan, I don't understand people who are rooting against the guy to be unsuccessful. It makes no sense to me. Just to prove your point, you say, oh, I want to bring in a high-powered offensive mind. The reality of it is if Aaron Glenn is a really good head coach and develops into a really good head coach, offensively, you can have guys come in here as OCs, whether that's Frank Reich, whether that's, Rex's kid replacing Reich eventually. The most important thing is to just have to figure out the quarterback position long-term, make sure they have the right weapons. Offensively, they will then figure it out if Glenn is a good head coach. If Glenn's not a good head coach, then forget it. And then we can all talk about who that replacement would look like. But this is a massive year for him, and it starts today. Next, I think on the list is who emerges as QB2. The Jets are going into this season as of today, and I think that could change. But right now it's interesting because you've got Geno, which, low risk trade. Would you give up a 7th round swap or something like that? Plus, you're only paying him a little over $1.5 million for the season. No commitment past this year. To hope that he has a bounce back season is fine. Gives you some, experience in the position. Certainly should be better than Fields. But your QB2 position is questionable right now, right? Right now, as it's lined up, Bailey Zappi is number 2. And yes, he has started some games in the NFL and has had times of competency. But the reality is Bailey Zappi is a very low-level QB2. And certainly if Geno were to get hurt and you had to go to Zappi, I would think that the majority of the fan base would feel pretty negative about that, even if you don't love Geno. I think that's a big drop-off. Then from there, you have the battle of Brady Cook, who I view him as a camp arm, honestly, at this point. I don't think he showed anything last year. And then Cade Klubnik. And while the selection of Cade Klubnik during the draft was certainly polarizing, and I would say leaning towards really negative, I certainly was negative at the time that they drafted him. I gave the Jets a D, I think, for that selection, because I thought drafting him in the 4th round when I wanted them to pick up a middle linebacker or, offensive line help, I thought there was people out there that they could have made moves for. They didn't. They drafted him because they obviously had a great connection with him. They like him, and they believe they can develop him. Now, the truth is, Klubnik had an awful season last year, but he played hurt. The team was an absolute mess. Not only was he bad, the coaching staff was bad. The talent was poor and overrated, and it resulted in an awful season for Clemson. As Klubnik got in front of the podium and did some stuff during, rookie minicamp and what have you, the mindset shift at the fan base level has improved dramatically for him. Now, that's not surprising. He's a young quarterback. I remember last year, everybody was excited about Brady Cook. I couldn't believe it, but I was screaming that they should draft a quarterback, and I got told, well, we got our quarterback with Brady Cook. He's just as good as a UDFA as some of these other guys that I wanted to see them draft. We know that that's not true. So there is the easy way to hype up a young quarterback, and certainly now Klubnik looked pretty good in practices, and he was awesome at the podium. He's clearly well-spoken, clearly confident, in kind of exudes a certain level of leadership and aura that you want in your QB. And so, do I think that there's a world where Cade Klubnik becomes the next Tom Brady, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, which, by the way, Dak was drafted late, but a lot of that had to do with he had some, I think he had a DUI right before the draft. There was some issues there. But, I'm not going, and I think that's a bridge too far. Is it a thing that I would root for? 1,000%. I mean, if you're a Jet fan, again, I don't get the mindset of wanting Glenn to be terrible, and I don't get the mindset of Klubnik just being a throwaway piece of crap and then just go get your quarterback next year. The best thing that could happen is that Cade Klubnik somehow, some way gets time this year and looks fantastic. I mean, that would be the greatest thing that could happen to this franchise when you think about what that would mean for their future. But the immediate question is Cade Klubnik capable of becoming QB2? I think the Jets, here we are on July 25th, I think the Jets are going to give him every opportunity under the sun to win QB2. I think they're going to play the hell out of him in preseason. He's going to get a ton of snaps, which they should do anyway. And he's athletic enough. He can throw on the run. He's got a decent enough arm. He's got enough size. There's, all of the things that made him a top-end prospect still exist. Can they develop him? Well, that's why you have Frank and Musgrave, and you got to see Musgrave. If he emerges as QB2 during the preseason, I don't think the Jets do anything. I think they keep him as QB2. I think Zappi becomes QB3. If it's clear that he's not ready to be QB2 and Zappy is QB2 by default, because I don't think Zappy's going to show you something he's suddenly never shown. I think it's likely the Jets will try to make a move for a quarterback before the season begins, much like they made moves during last training camp towards the end when they realized, hey, we need to make some moves, and they went and got Briggs because they realized, hey, we've got some gaps. I think you can pick up a quarterback that might be able to fill in who's better than a Zappy. I think they really want Klubnik to be QB2, but I think this is a TBD. If I was to guess right now, my guess is Klubnik looks really good. He still gets QB3 because they don't want to elevate him in week 1 as QB2, but it's pretty much an unspoken thing that he becomes QB2. I really believe that the Jets this season are going in with the mindset that this kid is going to be their QB2 and at some point will get some time. That's my personal view. I wouldn't be surprised if he stinks it up, that they go out and get themselves a veteran backup quarterback, somewhere in the market. There's a few guys out there. Nobody's going to blow you over in name wise, but I just don't see a world where Bailey Zappi is the cemented long-term QB2 for this season. Now, after that, I think it's actually an interesting question, and I frame it this way because if you notice, I didn't say who is the second wide receiver behind Garrett Wilson. I actually want to know who the second pass catch option is behind Garrett, because when you think about the way the Jets are set up offensively this year, Gino's got a ton of guys to throw the football to. You've got Garrett, obviously. You have Kenyon Sadiq now that you drafted, who I know he had hernia surgery, but all accounts say he's going to be fine. With sub 4.4 speed, kind of an athletic freak. He's going to be a matchup problem in that position, and you can move him around. A.D. Mitchell showed signs last year of being the guy that people thought when they drafted him. He still has some issues with, dropping passes. We'll see now with a full, off season and preseason to work with this team, what he becomes. I know there's a lot of people who are very high on him, and it looks like the Jets are too. They've got, they've been promoting him a lot in a lot of their social media. And he's a good kid to root for. I mean, he's well-spoken. He's got the right mindset. So you got AD, another fast guy, could emerge. You drafted Cooper, who's been really good. I don't think he's going to be your second pass catching option, but here's a guy, comes out of the slot, can play X as well, was super reliable at Indiana. I think usually it's very hard for, and look, they drafted him at the bottom of round 1, so they obviously feel really confident in him about someone who's going to emerge. But will he be the second pass catch option? I'm not sure. You have Mason Taylor, who looks like he spent a lot of time with Gino in the offseason working together. And Mason had his season cut short with injuries, but showed some promise. He's still super young. I think he's 21. I don't think he's got the same upside as obviously as Sadiq, but you could run a 2 tight end package with him and Sadiq. It becomes really interesting. And then you still have guys like Brees, who, was so underutilized in the passing game that you almost sometimes tend to forget how valuable he could be coming out of the backfield and becoming a true second option. So who becomes the second option? If I was to guess going in, right now, I think it'll be Garrett and Mitchell as your 1-2. But I would not be surprised with Reich utilizing. I think Reich will utilize Hall a lot, and I think there's a real chance that Brees Hall becomes the second pass catching option behind Garrett. And the reason why I say that is because I think what will happen, my personal opinion is they're going to try to get the ball out pretty quick. They're going to try to minimize Gino's mistakes Gino makes mistakes when he has it sounds funny to say this. When Gino has too much time to throw the ball, he sometimes overthinks it. He throws into double coverage. He forces things. He throws things that he thinks he sees something that's not there. The best way to minimize that is to get Gino to get the ball out pretty quickly. And how do you do that? Well, you've got speed on the outside. You've got speed now on the tight end spots where you can get crossers over the middle. And then you got guys out of the backfield like Brees. And so I just think what you'll see a lot of is, quick, not quick like Rodgers quick progressions, trying to move the ball, pushing the ball downfield where it's there, but then the quick outlets to the Brees Halls of the world, the Mason Taylors and the Kenyon Sadiqs, I can see happening. So I think we'll see Brees battling for the second most amount of catches on the team this year. And I think as the season progresses, if AD Mitchell emerges, he becomes a real wide receiver too, or Omar Cooper Jr. becomes wide receiver too. I actually am bringing my expectations of what we will get out of Sadiq a bit lower, because I don't think they're going to feature him with Mason Taylor also still in the mix, but I think it'll be really interesting. So that's something to watch. What kind of offensive schemes are they going to run? Are they going to minimize the mistakes from Gino? Are they going to try to get the ball out quickly? I think so, but we'll see. Which rookie is going to shine? Now, we haven't heard a lot about Bailey. Like, Bailey was the second pick overall in the draft, and it's been very, very quiet. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just an interesting thing. There's like no hype around it. And maybe it's just because of the position he plays. But, what's the expectation on David Bailey this year? I'm hoping for 7+ sacks personally. I think that's what this is a guy who's a specialist, pass rushing specialist. He's got a quick first step. I think anything under, and I get it. Look, first year, no differently than most first year rookies. They have an acclimation process, but I think, 6+, 7+ sacks should be, what your expectations should be. I think anything under that would be a bit disappointing. And then you've got, we talked about, Mark Cooper Jr., Kenyon Sadiq, Cade Klubnik, D'Angelo Pons. So I don't know. I have a feeling Pons is going to be super impressive. I love his attitude and mindset. He's got great ball skills. I think, he has a chance to potentially start and be an impact player immediately. Whereas I think guys like Omar Cooper Jr., I think is going to take time. I think he's going to be effective, but I think he's going to take time. I think Bailey, again, pass rusher, rookie season, we'll see. I hope they play him a lot more than just, like we do at Will McDonald. I don't want to see that. And then, Klubnik is a backup. And I think Sadiq is going to be splitting time with Mason Taylor. So I actually think the rookie that has the biggest potential impact, maybe year one, and it sounds maybe crazy, is to me D'Angelo Pons. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited to watch that kid play football. He was such an impact player on that defense for Indiana last year. And when you play with the kind of chip on his shoulder and the mindset that he has, and how he's been doubted his entire career, I just think those types of players do emerge. And it's funny because I think about Sauce's first season, how impactful he was at the position where he won Rookie Defensive Player of the Year. As good as Sauce was his first year, and I think his second year he was still good, he fell off because he to me, that hunger and that attitude that he played with in the first season was next level. And I think he's still searching for that. I do personally. So Pons might be that guy, and he hits better, I think, a lot better than Sauce. So you can see a lot of impact plays from him. I'm excited to see him play. Big question. The Jets' offensive line, it has the possibility of being a top, I don't know. I'm going to say top 15. Some people are going to call it a top 10 offensive line. I'm not there. I think you have the two bookend tackles with Olu and Membu, who I feel really good about, obviously. Titman at guard has been really, really strong. But then from there, I think you have the question marks, obviously, at guard and center. Center, to me, is the biggest question mark. I was surprised the Jets didn't make a move to go get themselves a quality starting center, or shifting Titman back to center and drafting a higher end guard. They chose what they chose. They obviously like Myers. I just think he's a bottom half center in the league, maybe even bottom third center in the league. And so what does that look like offensive line wise? It could be fine, but you got to stay healthy, because if you don't stay healthy and now you wind up having to slide in backups in these positions, it becomes like a snowball effect. And then, I just don't love the depth of the positions on the line in general, but most NFL teams don't have great offensive line depth. But I think it's a big question mark, and it's going to be, the engine that really makes the entire car move offensively. Geno's 35, going to be 36. He doesn't move like he used to. If he's getting flushed out of the pocket, having to make decisions, on the run, we saw it last year with the Raiders. We had no time to throw the ball. He was under a constant threat of pressure. He made tons of mistakes that way. No quarterback usually performs well in those situations, unless you're Pat Mahomes. So I think this offensive line is really key to everything for this team. And you got to stay healthy, because I don't love the makeup behind it. And so we'll see. Geno and Reich combined, do they equal success or not? And what do we mean by success? I don't mean that the Jets are a 10-win football team. Geno's throwing for 4,000 passing yards and 30 touchdowns. Success. Success is competency offensively, where you can take shots down the field, you can score points, you're not constantly playing from behind, because you're scoring early in the game and not picking up points late. Like, if you think about last year, the offense was so terrible. How many times did they just go into halftime where they were dead in the water? They couldn't score touchdowns in the first quarter. They were forced to have to throw because they fell behind defensively. They were bad. They couldn't run the ball consistently. And yet their offensive line was middle of the pack. If Geno is competent, and a competent Geno to me is not the final season in Seattle, because I kind of look at that final season as the beginning of his faltering as a starting quarterback. And people will disagree with me on this, but over the last two seasons, Geno's thrown 32 interceptions, right? 15 and 17. Seattle let him go because they weren't willing to give him the contract extension that he wanted, and they thought they had a really good football team. The Raiders brought him in with the intention for him to be the guy that was going to lead him to Pete Carroll, reuniting him and be really good. And he was terrible. Again, offensive line was bad. He had injuries on in his weapons. But the best success for Geno, to me, and I talked about it earlier, is making sure he gets the ball out pretty quickly, is not overthinking his decision making, that the Jets have an effective ground game, and that they're able to move the ball and score points early in a football game. If they fall behind, and obviously the defense is going to have a big part in that, about falling behind, but, get the ball to start the game and score points, right? Like, be competent. Make sure you're doing the right things. Catch the football when you're open. I mean, like, it sounds silly, like this football 101, but, you hope that Geno, who's been in the league for more than a decade, and Frank Reich together. And Frank Reich, look, his last season in Carolina was terrible. But if you go back, some years, and you look at what he did when he was with Indy, with kind of a hodgepodge of QBs, he did some really good things. And so does a guy with that kind of football mind just suddenly lose it and the game has passed him by? I don't know. I don't think so. He did a decent job at Stanford trying to help a very, very down program to kind of become at least competent. It'll be interesting to see what Reich does. He seems very positive about Gino. Obviously, I don't know what else he would say, but for Frank Reich to commit to come to the Jets, it's not because he needs money. And I know he's got a good friendship with Glenn. I do believe that he has a thought that he wants to at least, maybe it's 2 years. He wants to end his legacy in the NFL in a better way than he did when he was with Carolina that final season where it all went to crap. So I would expect quick passes, some downfield shots, a really strong running game, and try to minimize Gino's mistakes. If you can do those things and you run a middle of the pack offense, I think that there could be an interesting season for the Jets, and it saves Glenn's job. If Gino's competent and Reich does a good job, and again, Rex's son, they say he's super smart, innovative in the passing game. I think that the hope is he's a succession plan for Reich. That would be my belief, is what the plan here is. I actually do think there is a plan. Whether we agree that it will work or not is another question. But I do think there's a plan of Reich tutoring and mentoring Ryan to replace him in a couple of years after they draft a rookie quarterback that they can develop. That's my belief of what they're trying to do here. We'll see. This sounds funny, but competency is the bar for the defense. They were so awful last year, bottom 2 defense in the league. I don't want to see a 25th ranked defense and say, oh, they've gotten better. Like, you need to be a defense. Now, you've got enough bodies on defense to be average. And what I mean by that, you brought in Minka, you've got Davis now, 2 veteran leaders who should make sure your defense runs properly and that guys aren't in the wrong position. And how bad was the defense last year when they were getting beat on screens and they couldn't figure out what was going on? I mean, it was like the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. It was kind of Keystone Cops. Middle linebacker was a disaster last year. Pass rush was basically non-existent except for a couple of moments. You hope that Will McDonald has a bounce back season, and maybe now with Bailey on the opposite side, you're getting some pressure there. You hope that Williams next to Davis changes that dynamic. And, in the secondary, Stevens was kind of an average cornerback last year. I don't expect him to suddenly emerge. I think he's fine as a CB2. I think he's way below what a CB1 should be. But again, you got D'Angelo Pons back there now. You've got AZT. Hopefully he's healthy. And then the obvious risk or concern to me is, safety. Minka, he's started to show signs of slowing down. Who is he really this year as he approaches age 30 season? Cisco, I don't expect much of. I'm surprised he actually is back. And then you have Malachi Moore, who had flashes but was still not good. So I think there's a lot on the back end of that defense that scares me still. They should be better, a much better team against the run. They've got big boys now like Sweat in the middle. Briggs emerged last year and was very impressive in his time, and that was a great trade by Muji. But they're a work in progress. So do I expect the Jets to be a top 10, top 15 defense? No. But can you be 20th in the league, 18th in the league, be competent, not like look like you can be easily exposed and get beat on things that every one of us who are watching on TV are wondering what we're doing? And that's going to be a big, big telling sign of whether Aaron Glenn can survive year 2. If the defense is consistently showing up every week and the game plan is there and they keep the team in games, if it's just clear that Gino just doesn't have it, he's not the QB anymore, like can't be the starting QB, then okay. But if your weapons around Gino are good and you can minimize his mistakes, maybe he's a game manager until you're ready to replace him. But you should be. Robert Saleh won 7 games with a mishmash at quarterback, and Robert Saleh is not a good head coach, right? And yes, the Jets' schedule early on has a bunch of, challenges to it, but there's a lot of soft spots in that schedule too. So to me, if you're competent on defense and Reich is able to minimize Geno's mistakes, I'm not saying the Jets are going to win 9-10 games, but I think that there should be enough there that Glenn could save his job in going into year 3. But the interesting thing in all of this to me is what the fan sentiment is right now, because it is really a weird time. I remember, I became very active on X when the Jets signed Rodgers, because before that I was kind of a casual, and I've been able to engage a lot with the Jets fan base and others. Obviously I'm a Yankee fan, but during those 2 years that Rodgers was here, there was a ton of engagement, good and bad, right? The optimism at first, the gloom and doom afterwards. Last season, it became really toxic very early, when the Jets got out to an 0-4 start and then went down to 0-7. It was just, and listen, I was guilty of it as well as anybody. I became pretty negative. I was rooting for the tank at that point. I don't know how many different memes I posted of tanks, and it just didn't work out. That was kind of the reality of last year. And when they had brought Glenn in, I had said, look, this is a massive job for this guy, because it was at the time 14 years without playoffs. It's a rebuild. Fans are already angry going in. Our owner doesn't make it any easier for us as fans. And they got off to an awful start. Glenn wasn't good, and the thing just exploded last year. And, yeah, I mean, I will tell you from an engagement standpoint, we were engaged, but from engaged in a completely negative way. Now we go into this season, pretty quiet off season, except for the couple of Geno things. I think positivity around the draft in general, still massive question marks at head coach, massive question marks at quarterback. And look, the Jets, maybe it was because the Knicks had such a great run, but I will tell you, most of the things that I would post about, if I posted Jets content, didn't get anywhere near the type of engagement you would get previously. So I don't know exactly where the fan sentiment is, except what I see on X. And what I see on X is either a relatively, and maybe this is a good thing, I see a relatively muted expectation of people looking at this team and not thinking this can be a surprise 10-win football team. There's a couple of, and I love some of them. There are some of the guys that I call friends, who are like, they can win 10 games. I mean, I don't see that. But most people are in the mindset, even if you're an optimist, hey, 7 wins feels like a fair way to judge this football team as the bar. If they win less than 7, I think people will be looking for Glenn's job. And if they win more than 7 and they give you a 2015 Ryan Fitzpatrick season, then, oh, wow, that would be kind of a very positive directionally kind of mindset for the fan base. I think, though, in general, it's a very muted fan base right now. What will change that? The Jets open the season at Tennessee. Everyone that I know thinks that's a must win. I don't think it's a must win. I think it's a need. It's a really would like to win game, because week 2, Green Bay at home, no Micah. You're still an underdog in that game. Okay. You just can't line up against Geno, against Jordan Love. And I know Jordan Love's got his issues, but look, I just don't line those two teams up and say, yeah, the Jets should beat Green Bay. I mean, I don't see that. Could they? Yes. But if the Jets lose week 1 and now their home openers against Green Bay, where Green Bay will travel, they will have a lot of fans in the building. And the Jets somehow lose both the opener and the home opener, and they get off to an 0-2 start. And now you're faced with Detroit and Chicago on the road. If this starts out God forbid, as an 0-4 season, I tell you right now, fan sentiment is going to be DEFCON 5. I mean, people are going to lose their minds and want Glenn fired. Now, my brain says to me, I don't think there's any world where Aaron Glenn should get fired in this season, no matter how bad it gets, because all it does is create further uncertainty in the coaching search into next year. What I mean by that is it will look like Woody now would have fired 2 coaches in season. So what top end coach or high end prospect head coach would want the job? So for me, I have a view of the world of this is Glenn's year 2, no matter what. I want him to be successful. And my sentiment going into the season is I have measured optimism, because I'm actually not worried if they're like, I will not be, I'm saying this today, watch me during the season. I'm not expecting a ton of wins, right? So if they go 4-13 or 3-14, would I be shocked? No, I would just know that my head coach is getting fired because he's not the right guy. I'll be pissed off and annoyed after games because I watch every moment of every football game. But I actually think that that's more likely not going to be the case. And I think they're a 6-7 win football team. And a 6-7 win football team doesn't elicit a ton of emotion in general. There'll be moments of excitement. They do some great things. And then there'll be moments of frustration. They'll do some bad things. What you hope is the rookies emerge. The young talent looks good. We figure out our QB2 during the season. And we know definitively whether Aaron Glenn makes it into year 3. I forgot to mention kicker camp battle, but unfortunately, we don't have Nick Folk. And so, and I get it. He's old, and maybe his range was limited, although he only missed 1 kick all year last year. We'll see. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think there's a chance that the Jets kicker is currently not on the roster. And by the way, Folk wasn't on the roster at this point last year either. So I think it's very possible that when you think about the Jets and their kicker situation, could it be Jason Sanders? Sure. Could it be York? I don't think so. I don't think Cade York is going to be the kicker. I think if Sanders shows something, he could potentially be the default kicker. But I know there are concerns about, how he would do at MetLife. So that's just something to watch. And then, final thoughts for me. I'm looking forward to the training camp. I'm looking forward to watching young players play. I'm coming into this mindset-wise as a 6-7 win football team. And no, not the meme 6-7. I think Glenn will probably do enough to keep his job. I think Frank Reich will show enough that he, with a good quarterback, because I don't think Geno's a good quarterback anymore, but with a really good quarterback or getting the right guy, could develop somebody into being a very competent offense. I do. So I have optimism, cautious optimism, on the direction of the franchise. They're young. I think they're talented. They're fast. The defense needs more work. I think they'll do that in the next offseason. And our franchise quarterback's not here yet. So I do want to see Cade Klubnik play. I don't want to see him play before. I think if Cade Klubnik plays anytime before the bye, and the bye is late, right? They're playing 12 games before the bye. If Klubnik plays anytime before the bye, the chances of Glenn getting fired increase, because that would mean Geno was either terrible or he got hurt. If they play him after the bye, maybe the Jets are, I don't know. Let's say the Jets are 5-7 at the bye. They come back off the bye. They're really not in the race to make the playoffs, but they've shown a decent amount, 5-7. Okay. they're going to let Cade play the last 4 or 5, let's say last 5 games. And they go, all right, let's see what he's got. I could see that. And that Glenn feels like, well, if I get to 6 or 7 wins, I'm safe. We went 5 and 7 at the bye. Let's see what this kid has before the draft. I could see them doing that. You play him before that, it's a Dable situation, except Klubnik's not Dart, right? Dable went to Dart. His job was on the line. Dart looked good early. They were excited about it. Dart gets hurt. Dable's gone. Klubnik doesn't have that same energy behind him as where he might be as if you're forced to go to Klubnik before week 12, it's a Hail Mary from Glenn that he becomes Brock Purdy and saves his job. And I don't think that that's fair to anybody, especially a rookie coming off of a really bad final season at Clemson, where he's got to rebuild kind of his, as good as he could be potentially and confidence wise that he showed at the podium, until you get on the field and you're actually playing real ball, you just don't know. And I think that the game moves way faster than college. So it'll be interesting to see if he can emerge. But again, I wouldn't put him out there before the bye. So going into this, we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic. I look forward to what we find out as camp moves forward. I will be recording more regularly. I do apologize for being kind of on a hiatus for a while. But I applaud the content creators like the Jakes of the world and others who can do regular shows and constantly get on and chat, and my boy Nick Shine and those guys. And I've enjoyed being guests during the off season. But now that we're back, I'll be back. So please click like and subscribe. I appreciate you supporting the channel. And I do apologize again for my extended absence. Look forward to what we see this season. Let's go Jets.